Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak.
Captain Sanborn, a Harrier assault pilot, was flying bombing missions for Allied forces during the Persian Gulf War.
I remember on January 17, 1991, we had been prosecuting the air war. I got shot down on February 9th, so we'd been bombing, attacking the Iraqi forces that were in Kuwait. On that particular mission, it was my 17th combat mission, and I just unfortunately got hit by a surface-to-air missile, took off a wing, and I had to eject out of that aircraft. All that fire and smoke, the airplane talking to you, all the noise and confusion goes completely away, and it's as quiet as it is right now. You're hanging in a parachute, 10,000 feet, wearing a green flight suit over brown desert environment. You have an orange and white parachute overhead. You know, they just shot a missile at you. You just dropped 500-pound bombs on them. I mean, it's like you told them, here I come. And so they saw me coming down, and I was only on the ground for about 20 minutes before the Iraqi forces surrounded me and then physically captured me and took me to their underground bunkers.
During times of peace and war, members can be removed from their operational team or unit. If this puts them in an area of high risk, it most likely becomes a personnel recovery mission.
When you lose personnel, it's normally ambiguity. You don't know exactly where they are. They might be lost, and they might be operating in a hostile environment.
NATO adapts to meet current and complex security environments and be ahead of future threats. One recent adaptation is the introduction of an official NATO Personnel Recovery program. The goal? To mitigate scenarios like the one General Sanborn found himself in as a young pilot.
We understood that few nations has the full capability to recover isolated personnel. Therefore, we believe allies and partners can work together to share the burden of establishing a personnel recovery capability. We also need NATO command structure to be able to lead joint personnel recovery operational activity. So NATO is actually perfectly placed to bring all allies and all partners together to establish this capability.
If diplomatic efforts fail, the North Atlantic Council decides if military action is needed. Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets create accurate information both before and during extraction. Supporting units coordinate the geolocalization of isolated personnel, creating an opportunity for the JPR team.
We have always units on short notice to cover this task.
Personnel recovery is pre-planned and integrated into joint staffs within Allied command operations. A tactical mission commander leads a ready personnel recovery force.
We have to build from 8 individuals with different tasks, one functional element. They are going to a location where something happened prior. The only reason to be there is to solve a problem, not maybe a problem. The reason is there was a problem, want to do it fast, but no second longer on the ground than really necessary to authenticate, validate, and then definitely return in a secure way and with honor to the base. And that's the reason why we have to train in advance. We have to create such a strong small units team, and that is definitely necessary prior to deployment.
So what we have been able to do over the last 4 years is that we have developed all the necessary training, the necessary terminology, the necessary plans, the necessary directives and interoperability standards, so that the command structure can work together and has the capability to lead joint personnel recovery operations. Now, nations are starting to work together to make sure that the forces can work together at the tactical level. That means that the ISR resources and that the extraction forces and that the command and control of the extraction forces actually is starting to form as a capability as well.
Allied Command Transformation has built policies to determine JPR authorities within NATO. The doctrine, training, and readiness of NATO JPR increases the potential of recovered personnel and the reintegration with their families.
Once you're captured, you're not thinking about the joint personnel recovery at that point. Right now, you're just thinking about pure survival.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. The war with Iraq was brief, but for the Americans captured during the bombing and fighting, time couldn't pass fast enough.
There's the physical aspect of being a prisoner of war, surviving in that kind of environment, but there's also a psychological part, there's a mental part, which is just as difficult, if not more so.
So I think it's important to realize that in addition to the military member, there are extended family members who are also drastically impacted by this, but in a completely different way. It's a different trauma for us, the not knowing, and to have to wait patiently without sometimes a lot of information. I think, you asked if it had changed him. I think it's impossible to go through any kind of trauma that doesn't change you. How it changes you, though, and the encouragement in this is that it doesn't have to be a devastating part of your life from which you never recover. And he called and he said, what are you doing at work? Because he was missing. I don't know what he thought I would be doing. But my response to him was, well, one of us has to have a job, and I didn't know where you were. And he laughed at that. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, he can still laugh. That's a really good sign. Now, in perspective, when you put it in perspective, our son, who's now a Marine, is not much younger than we were when we went through that. And I think, gosh, we were really, really young. But one thing I will say is I have a lot of confidence in our military training.
If you give up hope, you've given up everything. So you got to believe in faith that either your own services is going to be there or the Joint Personnel Recovery team that is put together. There's some professionals out there. We've thought long and hard about that kind of stuff.
The dynamic, complex, and interconnected operating environment creates a greater need for effective personnel recovery capabilities. NATO JPR assists allies in reducing risk of lives while maintaining the welfare of their citizens, including the tens of thousands of servicemen and women who deploy in operations each year.